This is the ABQ Business Podcast with your host, Jason Rigby. Each week we'll interview visionary business leaders to inspire the creative power and spirit that's in every entrepreneur. Discussing strengths, weaknesses, strategies, systems, and the problems we can all solve together for a new future for local small business.
What is up, guys? So this episode right here, if you're into fitness, if you want to understand what's going on, especially with COVID-19 and everything and you're looking at being disrupted, or maybe you're going to a gym or maybe you're not, maybe with the mental space of just being with yourself and trying to figure that out. I have a return guest. Mr. Ryan, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Doing awesome. I mean, considering the situation, I know there's a lot of things going on. How has, let's get right into, if you don't mind, I want to, I follow you on Instagram, and I think everyone that listens to the show should. What is your Instagram? Because I want to make sure everybody follows you.
Yeah, it's aware_life ABQ on Instagram.
And then your website for those of you that want to look at maybe getting some online training, physical wise. What's your website?
Yep, you can find me at www.aware.training.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love about your Instagram and what's so amazing about it is that you're real. Like, I mean, even today you posted about Blake's Lotaburger. Was that today?
Yep, that was today.
I love that. And so let's kind of start there. You have a picture. Here you are, a personal trainer, and you train a lot of people, and you got a website on personal training, and you look the part. I mean, if people want to know what Patrick looks like, he looks like what do people say? Like like you look like off a Viking show or something.
I think his name is Tormund from Game of Thrones, and then oh man, what's the guy's name? He's the third base, Justin something.
Oh yeah. The major league player guy.
Yeah, from the Los Angeles Dodgers. I look very similar to both of them.
Yeah, so I mean, here you have this, big bearded burly guy, and then you have a picture of yourself eating at Blake's.
Yes, sir. Enjoying the finer things in life.
Yeah, but I really like the post, and maybe we'll start off with that if that's cool. Kind of some of the things that you were saying on the posts, and one of the things that you were talking about is, like things in moderation, and maybe that's what I got out of it. What spoke to me about your post was, going back for seconds, and then you talked about, is these seconds going to affect the way that I, work out and the things that I do with my kids, and how's my health going to be with my family? Maybe you could explain a little bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's obviously, I feel like there are many themes that I touch on that can certainly apply to many of those that interact with my content and come across it. But in this particular context, or this particular piece of content, I'm primarily referencing men, even deeper than that, dads, to where it's just a very common thing. Me being a guy and knowing that I at some point in time will be a dad, and referencing my experience with my dad at the dinner table. It's very common and socially reinforced and encouraged for us as men, I guess you'd say in general, to just eat pretty much as much as you want. It's never really put into question, and we were always kind of categorized or put into the category rather of, you're a growing boy, you're a growing man, you can go in for seconds, you can go in for thirds. It's never really questioned, and there's not a whole lot of thought put into, okay, let's look at this through a longer scope. And a lot of this comes from me as a professional. I specialize in helping dads lose 20 pounds and become a healthy role model for their family. That's their main goal, and I'm trying to really touch on these day-to-day interactions and experiences that maybe dads are consciously having or unconsciously having. Obviously, I'm touching on my own eating habits and seeing my dad eat, where it's just, like I stated, where you don't have to be the human garbage disposal, and really thinking about, regardless of what you're eating, healthy or unhealthy, really thinking about, okay, do I really need what is going for seconds and going for thirds? How is it serving me? Is it serving me in the way that I really want it to be serving me long term relative to my health, my what kind of eating patterns I'm mirroring for my kids and my family, etc.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me if you really think about it, our eating patterns really haven't the philosophy of our eating patterns really haven't changed since, when you think of the 1920s and 30s and you think of everybody having farms or acreage, and they're working from early morning till late in the evening, and the amount of calories you needed to have because you're working 7 days a week literally
Sure.
on a farm. And so that 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning, the noon and the 5 o'clock and getting seconds, those were things that were needed. But now most of us dads
Excuse me.
are sitting at a desk
Sure, sure.
8 hours a day.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, and I feel like you touch on really interesting points relative to what makes my job so much fun because I really do. I feel like it's a more so of a psychological holistic approach where if we're really wanting to get a deeper understanding of why we eat the way we eat, what we eat, how we eat, etc., we kind of have to dig a little bit deeper. It becomes far deeper than that of a meal program, far deeper than that of just your typical exercise program. You actually have to start auditing your experiences, both current as well as past. You talk about, yeah, 1920s, 1930s, relative to maybe people being more involved in the making and the cultivating of their food, as well as how different we're going through it right now. Everybody having to be home. We're
Right.
going through whatever amount of trauma associated with that. But I think about you talk about the 1920s, 1930s, like there are major world events, life events that are going on, the depression, World War One, World War Two, as time progresses, and that, whether we know it or not, that's influencing our behavior. And behavior is an extension of what we eat, why we eat, all that kind of stuff. And it influences how we are raised, how we behave around food, how we view food, all that kind of stuff. And in order to really get a deeper understanding as to why we are the way we are, we kind of have to look deeper contextually as to, well, then how was I raised? What were dinners like with my family? Was my dad, did my dad eat a particular way? Where was the group dynamic around the family? You have to eat everything off of your plate because your grandfather or your great grandfather or your great great grandfather or grandmother went through the depression and knew what it was like to not have any food, so they wouldn't waste food. Like stuff of that sort is really fascinating, and I don't think enough time and energy and effort is dedicated towards unearthing that for each of us as it applies to our own health journeys.
Yeah, I know, and you're 100% right. Just going back and looking at, my father was raised in South Georgia on a farm, very poor, and so you had this whole. It's disrespectful not to, grandma's in the kitchen cooking
Hmm.
all day. I mean, literally, in the kitchen all day long, and you eat what she puts on your plate. You eat it all, because it's even disrespectful not to eat those large farming portions.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's a really fascinating dynamic because it's going to change culturally as well. It's one of my fond memories of living in New Mexico now, as well as growing up in New Mexico and being immersed in Hispanic culture and having friends that had Hispanic heritage and Hispanic backgrounds, so where it was a very similar dynamic. Like when I stepped into a friend's home that had Hispanic Mexican roots, it was very much known that they're there to take care of you. They're there to make sure that you are fed, very well fed, that you are comfortable, et cetera, et cetera. And if you are to deny that in any way, shape, or form, it can be viewed as a little bit of a means of disrespect. So it's a really, really interesting line to try and balance on when it comes to navigating your own health and weight loss journey.
So, like with your clients and stuff, what are you seeing right now, especially with what's going on? I know with the whole, because I've been watching as I drive past the drive-through lines and see,
Hmm.
I mean, now restaurants are closed again, and just see the lines and lines of people. Are you seeing people gaining weight? Are people not taking care of their health, even though we're in a health crisis?
Sure.
What are you mainly seeing?
Well, speaking from my own experience and the clients I am working with, as a I would say as a group, as a whole, I'm seeing very positive things, and that being tied to consistency of movement in some way, shape, or form. Understandably, so the gyms aren't open, but I provide ways to navigate around that to where things aren't contingent upon a gym being available, as well as it translating into better eating habits, which are also translating towards weight loss. I just got done working on a video with one of my former online clients where we worked together for 3 months. So it was sometime around mid to late March until present day, end of June ish. And he had lost 15 pounds in about 3 months. So it's as far as the clients that I'm working with, it's really interesting. I think from an outsider's perspective to see people still making progress and still improving their health during a time where it's easy to go to a place of like, oh my gosh, like everything's changed, everything's upended. But I think this really ties very heavily towards something that you and I had been talking about a little bit earlier, to where it's like, okay, what are we ultimately creating as our own individual level of baseline, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, and I love that because I think when I look at the pressure cooker that everything is happening right now,
Hmm.
pardon my French, pressure cooker. I always remember fried chicken with my southern roots.
Right.
In a pressure cooker. But when you look at like COVID, and then now we're having all these circumstances with the police, and you've got what happened, the racial riots, and there's just so much going on that seems to be, and then everything has become politicized to the point, if you wear a mask, you don't wear a mask, you're a Trump supporter, or you're far left, super liberal,
Sure.
there's all these extremes and everything that's going on. And then you look at this kind of, for me, this peacefulness of being able to have a simpler life because things have slowed down dramatically.
Hmm.
And having the ability to be able to, like, since March, I think was when this hit pretty heavily, I've worked out more than I've ever had in my whole life. From March
Nice.
to now, and I've been eating really clean, but I think it's mainly because I've become to realize that I enjoy I've become to enjoy this simpler life. Like, we were so
Right.
busy before this.
Yeah. Oh, very almost. Um, yeah, almost startlingly busy. It's a very interesting dynamic, and it's a very interesting environment that we've been, I guess you can say, thrust into after having what was previously known as normal, and then being thrust into this new normal, where I don't know, to a certain extent, I don't know that it necessarily surprises me. And I say that through the experience. And I think we've all been here. We've all had these conversations, these pleasantries, so to speak, of these conversations of like, oh yeah, just gotta, it's the established norm. Like, I've got to work, I've got to be a part of the rat race, I've got to grind my life away, and it's this socially acceptable thing to go work at the expense of your health, go work at the expense of your preferred relationships, your family relationships, your
Mm,
intimate relationships. And we just kind of accept that as normal, and we just kind of live with it. And then years and years and years go. This is where I see parts of what we're going through as a blessing in disguise, because I feel like I can't remember what article I read, but it's, part of what we're going through has kind of been deemed the great pause. And
mm, love that.
um, everybody's going to interpret this differently, and I'm never going to invalidate anybody's experience. I can only speak to mine, and obviously you're sharing yours. But I tend to identify to a certain extent to, or identify with where you're coming from, to where it puts a lot of stuff into perspective as to what's really important as we continue to look at life through the lens of we have a finite amount of time on this planet.
Right.
So how am I going to spend it? And on top of that, I just think it's really fascinating because we've, good, bad, or indifferent, it just seems like we've been led to believe that we should live a life to where we're constantly escaping the confines of our home, to where we're thrust into an environment to where we have to actually be present with our home for an extended period of
Mm,
time, and
yeah.
that forcing us to look inward to some respect.
No, I love that. And I kind of want to talk about something you just said, because I think this is really important in forms of whether it's work or relationships. You said that we have to sacrifice, and there has to be an expense of us, and that there has to be some type of for us to receive a reward, we have to sacrifice ourselves personally.
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting, and obviously this is going to be different for everybody. And for those that know me, I don't think much of this should come as a surprise, but I feel like I'm continuing as a health professional, as well as just an individual. This is what really thrust me into this role, to where I'm a radical self, um, health and well-being person, to
Right.
where if whatever it is I'm going to do with my life, with my job, et cetera, it's got to pass a few tests. It's got to go through a few barriers to entry. And if at any point those decisions or those circumstances are going to impede a certain standard around it affecting my health and my
Mm,
well-being in any way, shape, or form that I'm not okay with, I'm just not going to do it. And I feel like there are a handful of people. It sounds like you're one of the many included, where this has forced that internal dialogue of, and this is also from experience in working with plenty of clients who are in their late 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. And I like to use the phrase or the quote, you spend your health in pursuit of wealth. You're young. It's like, okay, I can give it up. I'll spend my health to make more money and to climb the ladder, whatever that might mean, without really consciously knowing that you're developing these habits around your eating and around your exercise and around your coping and around your mental state of mind, to where when you decide to utilize the wealth that you've accumulated to regain your health, it's so much more difficult because you've got 50, 60 years of conditioning around your habits, around everything that you use to like your views on exercise, eating, like I said, coping, etc., to where it makes it dramatically more difficult than if you were to work in the opposite direction, to where it's like, no, I'm going to and again, this is through my bias and my preference, where it's like, I am going to let my health, I'm going to utilize my health as a means of navigating life, not the other way around. I'm not going to let life really push me in a direction that I don't have control over, as it applies to my health and my well-being, which at the end of the day is our most valuable resource.
Yeah, and Pat, something that you said that, and I don't understand this mentality. And maybe it's just of working on myself, or trying to figure out life. But there has to come to a point where you say that you can be wealthy and healthy, that you don't have to give up something, that you can create. We can create whatever we want to create. We have this unlimited power within us that can create. You take your passion and you're truly happy and you move in that direction. You
Yeah.
have the ability and the freedom to be able to create what you want in that space. You don't have to give up something to get something. To have that big house, you don't have to give up your health completely, or not be a good dad, or cheat at work. You see what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah, yeah, I think you touch on some really valid points, and It's really interesting because I think part of those points, or a handful of those points, have to be looked at through. We're obviously looking at that through the context of present day, right? To where,
Right.
um, I guess you could say, let's how would you put it? We're looking at things through the lens of how we were raised. Looking back at how our parents went through life, to where it almost seemed as if that was the case, the black and white dynamic of life, to where it's like, well, if you're going to do this, you have to sacrifice this, because maybe, not maybe, it was pretty apparent that in some way, shape, or form, generations and generations that continued to come before us kind of had to do that. And it's a much different dynamic now, relative to just the world we live in, to where I feel like the black and white becomes more gray, to where you can shape what it is that you're passionate about and what you truly want to do around around you and around your life. So if being health centered is your priority, by all means, it's there for you. And it doesn't you're almost breaking through and breaking out of those stigmas of that black and white dynamic, of feeling like you inevitably have to sacrifice something. But I feel like a lot of that has to do with generations that came before us, that's kind of what they had to do. So we look at that, we almost get caught up in that frame of thinking that that has to be the case for us.
And I always say, I would rather make 40,000 a year and be happy than make 140,000 a year and be miserable and sacrificing everything. We get into this old mentality of where we feel like we have to have an MBA and we have to go into accounting, or we have to be a doctor. If that's your passion, great. Love those numbers, get into it, help as many people as you can as a doctor, but there's so many people in positions that they're absolutely hating to go to work day in and day out, and you're not going to be motivated to take care of yourself if you're not living in that passion every day.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously, being the health professional, my argument, or I guess you could say my point, that I think at some point in time, people end up coming to understand that you actually it's almost as if everybody's pouring from a perpetually empty cup, to
Yes.
where if you're actually not taking care of your health, and you're not taking care of your well-being, you actually don't know any better. All you know is how your body functions, how you perform at work, and you assume that that's kind of it, as opposed to experiencing that difference of whatever it might be for you. It could be running, walking, stretching, any number of things, changing your eating, etc., etc. But actually being able to see how much more productive you are as a result of taking care of yourself, and not only just more productive, but more capable of helping other people within your respective service, whether it be accounting, body work, therapy, et cetera. You're always going to be able to put your best foot forward, because you've taken care of yourself. But that's still a really, really interesting dynamic, and a really interesting conversation that is still yet to be had, as well as I feel like applauded in Western culture.
Yeah, and I was talking to a business leader about 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about, and he was just talking about how unhappy he is, but how successful he is. And he works out, he does everything. I mean, he's working 10, 20-hour days. I mean, he's working
Hmm.
out, perfect physique, everything on the, lovely wife, 2 kids, everything that you could imagine would be.
Hmm.
And we started talking, and it came to the point where it was like, the reason that he's not happy is he's just doing tasks all day long. He's looking at, I got to, okay, it's 8 o'clock at night. I just had dinner. I'm going to relax for 30 minutes. That's a task. And then I'm going to go work out. I'm going to do, you know, 5 sets, 10, 12,
Hmm.
8, 6 reps. And everything in his whole life just became check marks of tasks to complete.
Sure. Yeah, it's there's I'll quote my dad, because each time he and I have a conversation in any way, shape, or form, it always comes back to balance. And it's you can have, because I can relate to that to a certain extent, to where I feel like I can very much, and many people can thrive in more controlled environments to where it's like, okay, I've just got to plan out my day and I've got to create this checklist and do this way, this way, and this way, without knowing that if that's all we're doing, we're reinforcing these habits and these patterns and these behaviors around how we utilize our time, to where even what is supposed to be more under controlled territory that doesn't need to have a checklist and doesn't need to be super regimented, we ultimately impose that controlled nature and impose that regimented nature around it, and then we come to find we don't enjoy it as much, and we're still wondering why. And it's there are contrasting elements to life that need to be at play in order for us to actually be more present within that balance.
Yeah, and I think, because I use task and checklists, and I have a journal, and I have a planner and all that. But what we were talking about, and I think we can all relate to this. What he was talking about is like he was coaching somebody, being a leader. He was coaching this person, and he's like, honestly, Jason, I didn't hear a word they said. I just knew I had to spend 20 minutes coaching with them, and I had already pre-designed the tasks that I needed them to accomplish so they would be successful and they would move on in their sales journey. And he goes, just I was just checking, and really he goes, I got to the point to where I had to sit there and say, I'm talking to a human being. I need to listen to them and understand they're valuing this 20 minutes of time that they're with me. And it's not me checking off the mark that I talked to them or coached them. It's the whole idea of me being of service to this person and being of help to them, because they have a family, and they are looking at me as a leader. So I think it was more of like not just checking off the checks, but am I really truly following my passion in what I'm
Yeah,
doing?
yeah, yeah. I can definitely see that. That makes perfect sense. I almost get a sense of trying to make sure and tune in to making sure that you're present with whatever it is that you're doing.
Yes, exactly, 100%. So one of the things that you mentioned, a word that you mentioned, and I want to talk about this because we have record sales in New Mexico for alcohol. um, is You use the word that people are escaping. And so whether you use alcohol, whether you use food or whatever, and I know, a lot of people are binge watching Netflix or whatever, there's this attitude of just kind of saying fuck it and escape from everything.
Hmm.
What are some of the things that people can do to be more present?
Let's see. Which route do I want to go off the top of my head?
Keep up
So,
on that.
um, well, because what I'm getting at is obviously I think everybody knows and this is where I feel my approach and my viewpoint on things is a little bit different, because I like going deeper into context. I like kind of going off the beaten path from
Right.
what is typically seen, and kind of viewed or expected from a quote fitness professional, where it's like, yeah, I could beat a dead horse and saying, oh yeah, go work out more, go exercise more, et cetera, like eat better, all that kind of stuff. I feel like a lot of that everybody knows, but I feel like that's kind of played out, and it's a very two-dimensional approach to handling stress in any way, shape, or form, because we were handling stress, or we were living through stress and dealing with stress prior to COVID happening. And guess what? We're still dealing with stress and handling it while we're going through COVID. Like, stress is a norm, it's a constant.
Right.
And, as I've been at my home for an extended period of time, it's almost feeling like it's coming up on like 5 months or something of that sort. Um, is leveraging support. I feel the different, sure, exercise or a meal program or anything like that can really help add structure, but in all actuality, from my professional opinion, it means nothing if there's no communication around it. In the event that you're hiring a coach or you're working with somebody on something like that, it's all every your progress and your improvement and your coping. It all comes from communication. And I speak from my own experience, not only with my clients but myself, to where during a time like this, I feel like this is where we must leverage our support system even more now than ever. and talking with people over the phone, messaging back and forth, taking time to talk to your loved ones, to vent, to get frustrations out, and really get any negative energy that would otherwise be festering while you're sitting at home, maybe by yourself, alone with your thoughts, and kind of getting those out, and kind of letting that exercise of communication and venting and leaning, looking and vying for support as a means of letting it grow legs, and letting it take you kind of on a different trip, and different journey of your own improved well-being, and I guess you could say recovery through what is otherwise kind of a scary, weird, awkward time.
Yeah, and I don't know, because we've been so busy and so task oriented, we haven't took the time to be able to look at ourselves, and you see, like relationships are breaking up. People are they're having to be, and they're talking about they may do another lockdown or whatever, so that
Right.
and then people are getting fearful of that, and there's uprisings and stuff, you know,
Hmm.
it's this ability to be able to set with yourself and be present and be able to to be comfortable,
Yeah.
with yourself. And I think when you have two people that have lived together and they've never done that for themselves first, and then got to know the other person really, because we were always so busy, and then finally there's two people sitting on a couch with absolutely nothing to do.
Right.
Then it becomes reality, and it's like, um, you know, you can use it as an opportunity to be self-destructive, or you can use an opportunity to, like you said, to walk a different path and to kind of be brave enough. I think that's a word, to be brave enough to let it grow legs
Sure. Yeah.
and kind of take that, let your brain take you on that wild journey.
No, it's, I think you're speaking to the truth. It's being willing and open and uh, vulnerable within that space of discomfort, of trying and doing something a little bit different, as well as, I guess you could say, compassionately questioning how things were done in the past relative to what we had control over. I know for me during this time, which has been really fascinating, is really questioning the status quo, and really questioning, was the quote normal that we had prior to this going on, was that really that, I guess you could say, beneficial?
Mm,
Was it really serving me on a deep, nourishing soul, spiritual level? Was it serving my well-being? Was it serving my health? And if it wasn't, then is it really something that, if we quote go back to normal, is it really something that I want to consciously reintegrate myself into, and just
yes.
kind of pick up where I left off? Or do I want to try and make a subtle adjustment within that framework?
No, I
And
love that.
that's,
I
yeah.
love that you're thinking that forward, and that's something that challenges me. It's like, okay, what are some of the opportunities that I have right now to recreate myself?
Yeah, yeah, and really create a. I just view it as seeing this as as an opportunity to create a new standard for yourself, and that
Right.
this is kind of yeah, this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, as far as each, and this is something I work with through my clients, in each client on an individual basis, like you determining what your foundation is, you determining what your baseline is, as far as like, this is how I live my life, this is how I take care of my health, this is how I take care of my well-being, and quite literally mapping out the rest of your life around that, instead of the other way around. Really working through a space of, this is my nucleus, this is not going to ever be imposed, because this is the standard I'm setting for myself. Whether it's getting, I'm big on mountain biking, so I'm not going to sacrifice mountain biking. I'm not going to
Right.
sacrifice hiking. I'm not going to sacrifice my meditation, because I've immersed myself in it. I've seen how much better it makes me feel. My girlfriend sees how much better of a person I am when I regularly practice that. So I have nothing but good positive stimulus coming from those experiences. So why on earth would I ever want to change those in the pursuit of money, in the pursuit of grandeur, et cetera, at the detriment of my true well-being?
Yeah, and I talked to a lady the other day, and we were talking, and she's like, I'm really enjoying this ability to be able to work part time at home, and then I go into the office a little bit. But
Hmm.
I'm doing yoga in the morning. I'm being consistent with it. I'm able to walk my dog, which is
Hmm.
huge. Being mindful, being able to be with something that you love, and take the time to get outside to get the fresh air. And she goes, I'm just afraid, I'm going to go back to the old way, and then I'll have to fight the traffic in the morning. And I said, "Well, how have you done with your work?" And she goes, I've just been more creative and I've been kicking ass and the bosses love it." I said, "I guarantee you, if you have a conversation with them and you tell them this is the schedule you want and you will continue to put out the type of work that you're putting out and the excellence that you're doing, I guarantee you they'll be happy." And she's like, "Really?" I was like, "Yeah, ask them." And so she had a conversation. They were doing Zoom meetings and all that. And she had a conversation and they're like, "Yeah, for sure. This is probably going to be the new way." And,
Yeah,
it right there, she freed up her morning to
yeah.
be able to do the things that she loved, to be able to consistently do her yoga and to be able to walk with her dog. And, and that was, I think that's what you're saying. It's like, mountain biking and hiking and being with you. Is it your fiance? Are you guys married? Or I follow you on it.
Not, yeah, yeah, not quite. Girlfriend now. In the near
Girlfriend?
future, that
Oh, I'm
will
pushing you
change.
along, bro.
No, no, you're good.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, but I knew you guys seem to be pretty serious and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
but just to see, you can see that when you're mountain biking and you post a picture and you're super happy and you've had that exhilaration, you've been outside and been one with nature. There's something that is incredible that happens with that. And that's I kind of want to, if we can, shift a little bit more into the practical with some things that people can do even during this time. Everybody's so used to going from a concrete building to another concrete building, which is called a gym, and then to
Hmm.
go to another concrete building, which is their home. And now we have this wonderful opportunity. And something I've learned over these 4 months is we have this huge gym
Yeah.
with the sun that actually heals us.
Right. Right.
What are you encouraging your clients? What are you seeing with people that are getting outside and exercising and just absorbing nature?
Yeah, it's always going to have positive feedback, I think, for the most part, but I think it's just like anything else, it's got to be done with intention, and it's got to be done. I just like to take a slow drip approach with stuff. A good example I'll give to where it's the set and setting and the intention behind what you're doing that can really map out what all future experience is going to be like, and kind of your viewpoint around stuff, whether it's positive or negative. Like, we're in New Mexico, we got the La Luz Trail, the tram is closed. So ultimately, that trail's, I think it's about 16 miles or so round trip. Regardless, even if you were hiking up and the tram was open, it's an 8 mile trek up a mountain. You're at 10,000 some odd feet at the top. And you have people that have not hiked, they're not prepared, they're not wearing clothes fit for it, they're not hydrated, they're not bringing water, but they say, screw it, I'm going to go for it. And they have, quite honestly, a miserable experience. They might have to get rescued, et cetera, et cetera. So that kind of shapes their entire experience to where it's like, oh, maybe outdoor stuff isn't my thing. So I think the intentionality behind it is really helpful in that, for people who, because obviously getting outdoors and stuff like that, it's a trendy thing. It looks good, all that kind of stuff, which is all cool and nice. But I feel like it's got to be, when someone's interested in delving into uncomfortable territory, such as it could be something as small as a half a mile hike or a quarter mile or a mile. It's just taking it slow. I feel like there are these universal truths within every dimension of life that hold true no matter what you're doing. And it could be maybe prepping for getting outside, and outside your comfort zone, where maybe going to a park could start as small as going into your front yard. I posted something a couple months ago around, if you're wanting to do yoga and you're wanting to break up the space of doing it at your home, stuff of that sort, you can try and do it on your front porch, and just really, really expand slowly over the course of time, slowly expanding your parameters as to what you're comfortable with and what becomes this new known norm for you, to where it's like you started by working out in your front yard, and then next thing you know, you're going out and hiking all by yourself. You've got everything you need prepared, but that came from a place of taking small baby building block steps.
Yeah, I like that. I like the words you use, slow drip. I think that if you think of it in that context visually, that gives you an idea of preparing yourself for something that is going to be a long-term habit.
Yeah, well, and this obviously comes from a place of coaching hundreds of clients and working with them in I guess you'd say integrating sustainable habit change. And I ask all my clients, and I'll throw it out there to everybody that listens to this, and asking themselves the question: do I want to be healthy the rest of my life? And I have yet to ever get or an answer that would say no. And with that resounding yes, I would argue it forces us to look at our journey through a
Mm.
much, much, much longer term view. I like to say we're all in this for the long haul. We're playing the long game here. So why is it, and a lot of this is what we deal with in our culture, to where it's very much reinforced and almost applauded and glorified to just rip the band-aid off. Oh, you've never done this thing? Okay, just go all in and go do this and go at it full bore, when for the vast majority of people, the adherence level to that stuff long term, obviously going back to being healthy our whole lives, it doesn't stick. It doesn't stick long term. So I like that slow drip kind of analogy, to where it's like just take it one step at a time, and then we build into something bigger over a year, 2 years, 3 years. All that kind of stuff compounds over time.
Yeah, and I mean that question, when you really begin to think about it, and then you think, what is, when I'm 30, what does that look like? When I'm 40, what does that look like? When I'm 50, when you really
Hmm.
begin to think about healthy lifestyle, it's totally different than having that. And we talked about this in our last podcast, but it's totally different than having that. I need to go to Vegas and I need to wear my bikini in 6 weeks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, because I would argue the art of this journey of life is being able to constantly pivot. And I speak
Mm,
from
that's good.
my own personal experience, because if I were to train and if I were to exercise the same way I did, I'm 30 now. If I were to train and exercise the same way that I did whenever I was in my late teens, early to mid 20s, exercise would be miserable. Like
Yes.
I did bodybuilding, I did all natural bodybuilding for a few years, and it served me during that time because I had the energy, I had the angst for it, all that kind of stuff, to where it was all about just beating the crap out of yourself. Like push yourself to the nth degree. You're sweating, you're ready to pass out, you're ready to throw up. Like I want nothing to do with that right at this point in my life. Like I want to move because it's fun. I want to exercise knowing that it's going to help me whenever I go hike. It's going to help me when I go ride, because it serves a greater purpose of I just want to be I want to be more I want to be more in tune, and I want to be more present. I want to be more engaged with the earth, and by extension with life, with other people, with I speak with dads all the time. They want to just be able to keep up with their kids. That's engagement. You want to be in such a state of health to where you're more present with those that are most important to you. And I think that's where trying to find a greater purpose around that, knowing that, hey, I'm healthy. I'm at a good weight. I have good habits around eating and exercise, but I also know I need to pivot. I need to adjust. What served me 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, exercise wise, may not actually be the best thing for me now. So the best life is just full of adaptation. We wouldn't be on this call right now if our ancestors didn't adapt and make adjustments. And that's all we're going through right now. So it shouldn't be any different when it comes to how we take care of ourselves over the course of our lives.
So let's imagine that there's, and I know there's, hundreds of dads that will be listening to this, because you brought up dads, and let's imagine that there's a dad out there and he's out of shape and he's got the pot belly, and he's drinking all the time and not exercising, and maybe successful, maybe he's working at being successful, and kind of that resonated, what you said, that resonated with them. Working, being able to keep up with their kids and stuff, and just not being happy looking at themselves in the mirror or whatever. What are some of the things, one, they need to hire you, of course, but or go through your program online. But what are some of the things that you start off with someone like that, for them to gain insight, to encourage them to go to that next level, to, like you said, to pivot?
Yeah. This has been a really prevalent theme, I would say, over the last week, and me thinking about um, just the systems and the thought processes at play. And this is coming from a space of, I'm a man. I will be a husband in the near future. I will be a father in the near future, and this is part of the reason why I've decided to go this route, because I think at least the first step for me, and I see it a lot with a lot of the many of the dads that I train, is really coming to terms and understanding and acknowledging that we as men don't do a really good job of taking care of ourselves,
Right.
and that's reinforced in many dimensions of life, but most importantly it's reinforced internally by ourselves, to where we put ourselves last. We're willing, and it ties into some of the stuff you and I were talking about earlier, where it's like, climb the ladder, make the money, provide at the detriment of your own well-being. And next thing you know, you're 30, 40 some odd years old, you're 20, 30 pounds overweight, and you ain't sure. Your family might be where you want them to be, but you're not anywhere close to happy with where you are. And I think it all starts internally, of just making a distinct determination and decision around, I can't pour from an empty cup anymore. And I always love this analogy of, even though not many people are flying right now, but there's a reason when the oxygen masks drop, they tell you put that mask on yourself first
100%. Yes.
in order to help other people. And I feel like that is a very big problem within the family dynamics, within at least our culture here in America, where it's like, it's just socially acceptable. I've seen it within my family, other families. I see that within behaviors within myself, where it's easy to go to a place of like, oh, I don't deserve, I can't, I don't deserve to, treat myself to this or treat myself to that. But they're very willing to do anything possible for their kids, their wife, their husband, significant other, etc. And it's really, one of my online clients mentioned it. I think the first step in making any amount of progress is recognition, and recognizing that, okay, I've got a set of patterns that might need to be adjusted, and starting to take those steps, no matter how small it might be, in taking care of yourself. And this is where it ties into our point, or our discussion earlier, around leveraging that support, and utilizing communication throughout your family, and letting them know, like, hey, this is where I'm at, and I want to start making some adjustments, and leveraging communication. That way everybody's on at least a similar page when it comes to what's to be done into the future.
Yeah, and I love that you said the don't deserve, and when you take that mask analogy, and when you understand, when you're operating from an empty cup or on fumes, you're not giving the best of yourself to those that you love the most.
Yep,
So
and it
that's
ties it,
showing them.
it ties right into what we were talking about, just with the general public, when it comes to feeling like all they have to do and all they can do is work, when in all actuality they will get more work. Same from an employer's perspective. You're going to get more productivity, more creativity from an employee that is well nourished, that is taken care of, that is active, that is healthy, than one that is not.
Yeah, and then you see healthcare rising costs and everything that's going on with that, and then the level of obesity here, and that's what I remember. My father's passed away, and he passed away early, but I remember me playing basketball and being in high school sports and stuff like that, and just him never being active because he was just sick and obese all the time,
Hmm.
and then constantly eating fast food and going through, it just that whole process, and then a very loving dad, but the physical part of him being so tired all the time, not being able to be present with me, him, going at night and watching TV with an oxygen mask on, when I'm a
Hmm.
teenager, and then seeing all that, that is where a future lies for someone that is not willing to take their health and say, and I think like the slow drip approach, like you said, is taking this and saying, you know, and I was listening to a podcast the other day, and one of the guys said a doctor was really mean to him and woke him up, and it was really good for him, and it changed him. He goes, the doctor told him and said, "You have a daughter. She's 11 years old now. The way that you're going, you will not be walking her down the aisle when she gets married."
Yeah.
And he changed his, and I think for men, sometimes we need that type of accountability, that says, and that's why, and I want you to get into a little bit of coaching and stuff like that, but I think that's why it's so important for us to look at that long term, like you said, to look at that health, because you may be providing and doing all that you can right now and sacrificing your health, and then you're not there in these
Yeah.
important times as your children get older and where they need to be at in life. What are you seeing, especially, and I want to kind of, because this is interesting, I want to get into like men and accountability.
Hmm.
Is that's when with coaching, is that kind of the main thing that men are needing, is that accountability for you to come in and say, not in a grading way, but you to come in and say, hey, where you're at, can you be, are do people have a hard time with accountability? Are they honest?
Well, so it's really interesting. So I find, and this is my personal opinion, but this is, I feel like a lot of this has to do with what kind of system is being put into place, as well as really, I feel like me as a professional and how I am going to continue to express myself and continue to articulate myself is really going to filter in the type of individuals that are wanting to work with me. So how they are going to be coached and how they are going to be held accountable really shouldn't come as much of a surprise, in
Mm,
that I'm not I'm not a boot camp style coach. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to try and make you feel bad, all that kind of stuff. And the reason being is because I've been doing this for close to a decade now. I used to do that when I first started coaching, and this goes right back to what we were talking about, the long-term view. What happened whenever I used that approach, the hard ass approach? The adherence level wasn't very good.
mm,
So guys wouldn't stick to programs long term, but somehow we think that is what we need. We need the hard ass approach, but all that typically does for most guys is it perpetuates that roller coaster, that spike in weight, and then that decline or that valley in weight, and it's over and over and over again. So where things become different, and this ties into my point earlier, to where it's communication. Sure, I provide nutrition coaching, I provide I provide exercise programming, but really, in my opinion, the differentiating factor is communication, and consistent communication with my clients, and getting an understanding and kind of staying on the pulse of what's going on in their day to day and what's influencing their eating. Like, I have dads I'm working with right now that are living through COVID, and they're trying to figure everything out. And what really helps is being able to talk about that, and talk about how they're trying to put together a game plan to take care of their family as well as take care of themselves, knowing that they're gonna be in a much better position well on into the future. So I almost feel like the consistent communication and really collaboration with one another is the redefined version, or the 2.0 version of accountability.
Yeah, when I see accountability, a lot of times, like you said, especially with negative reinforcement, like if a person feels like they don't deserve, you had used those words before, and I think it's so important. They don't deserve something, and then you're just yelling at them and trying to get them. We haven't. You're spiking, like you said. We haven't got to the root of the cause yet. We have to deal with this "I don't deserve" part first before we can even go to that next level. If you're lifting weights and feel like you still don't deserve your life, what is good is that?
Yeah, yeah. It's it's not the sexiest and most sleek approach, especially in my industry, because it's very easy to just throw out flashy, I call them band-aid solutions, where it's like, yeah, get a program, get a diet program, and it's all going to take care of stuff. But um, I would argue that that's just a surface level solution. You're really not scratching the surface when it comes to getting an understanding of why you feel that way and unearthing everything that's kind of gone on in your, and that everybody kind of discloses that information at their own pace. It's very individualized in that regard, but really having some light bulbs go off as to, oh yeah, i I never thought about that. I exercise the way I do because of A, B, C, or D. And if we were to just push them to the nth degree, I really feel like we would only just be kicking the can down the road.
Yeah, and we see what happened during COVID too with, you can't buy a kettlebell. I mean,
Uh-huh.
the kettlebell market literally went, I mean everybody went and bought kettlebells, and they've got yoga mats and foam rollers, and now we just went into this perpetual Amazon purchasing spree to move to the next, to the next, to the next thing, and now you have homes littered with all this fitness equipment, and people using them, like I think you had posted that today on that post. You buy a $2,000 mountain bike, and I talked to a local shop here, a mountain bike shop, and they're like, I can't keep bikes in stock. People are
Yep.
just buying bikes, and then they use them once or twice. So that has to do with that underlying, that kettlebell's just sitting in a room and you're going to stub your toe on it,
Right.
apart to having this ability to feel like, I need to do, because as well as I do, when you look at long-term health, and one of the things I'm figuring out is compound interest and consistency,
Hmm.
making sure I don't get injured. That's kind of like my philosophy in the way that I work out. It's like, okay, I'm 47 now. Injuries are bad.
Yeah.
Injuries can take me out for a long time. So I'm not going to sit there and, for me, I don't want to go super, super heavy, deep squats, you
Yeah.
know, um, with 400 pounds on. I'm just not interested in that. But taking a run to the park, doing, burpees and push ups and pull ups on, the playground bar and stuff like that, swinging my kettlebell, after I figured out proper swing, which took me
Right.
years. I
Sure.
mean, I didn't realize how bad I was messing my back up just off of. And if you guys, all you guys about these kettlebell swings, maybe you could talk to this real quick. A kettlebell swing is totally different than you think it is.
Sure.
It
Certainly.
is not a squat and bending all the way over. That's what I was doing poorly. So one of the things, Pat, is whenever I'm looking at working out, one of the big things that I'm seeing is making sure, I don't get injured. And I know you have some, you have younger clients and you have older clients, but whenever you're looking, it's not just the amount of weight you can lift or bench press or whatever. Or we did these new, I know for me, I have no desire to do CrossFit. I
Hmm.
just feel like that would be something that I'm not at that level, and injuries and stuff like that. What are you looking at when you take this long-term approach with your clients, and looking at saying, oh, okay, being healthy, what does that look like in exercise?
Well, it's gonna vary on a case by case basis. That's for sure. And it's really interesting because I'd say in one way, shape, or form, this is not something that I can just impose my knowledge or my preferred way of doing things on the client, because it's just not going to work. This is very much a journey of self discovery. The way I look at it is, what gets people in the door is, yes, they're going to get guided. approach and a guided approach and guided help with their exercise and eating. But through that is where we start to, I guess you could say, we start to uncover the layers and go deeper into their journey and get a better understanding of what longevity means to them. Where, for instance, I worked with a guy that still was kind of sifting through his own stuff when it came to his relationship with exercise, and felt like wasn't being pushed hard enough, wasn't working out hard enough. So he went through his own guided trial and error and went back to pushing himself and really pushing himself to the nth degree. And it resulted in some injury. It resulted in a couple injuries, and it turned into his own aha moment of like, okay, maybe this is the point where I really have to reassess and adjust my style of training to suit the longevity of my health. And
Right.
you talking about, I'm not gonna squat 400 pounds, et cetera, I think is a really great point, in that it reminds me of some dialogue I had internally in my mid 20s or so, when I started to kind of let go of the conventional weightlifting centric approach to exercise, when it was like, well, is really pushing myself that hard and lifting as heavy as humanly possible, let's be honest here, is it really, really, really going to add another year to my life? Is it going to add another day? Is it going to
Mm,
add another a week? And as I continued thinking about it, I was like, I don't think that's very likely when it comes to staying consistent over the long haul. This is a marathon, whether we like to believe it or not. And a lot of it is going through the client, going through their own trial and error, knowing that I'm in their corner to help not only support them, but help them interpret that, because this is where, as a coach, the easiest thing I could do as a coach is just tell a client, I have done this, and this is part of my evolution and how I train. It's the easiest thing on the face of the planet. If you've got a client that's motivated, that's like, oh, I want to go 5 days a week and push to the nth degree, it's super easy to just go pedal to the metal and say, yeah, go do that, go do that, go do that. But long term, it's likely not going to serve them in the best of ways. So
right.
the real art, I believe, as a coach, is really knowing when and how to pump the brakes, and how to provide deeper context as to, hey, I know you're pumped, I know you really want to push hard, but this is why I recommend we kind of back off a little bit and provide deeper context as to why, as well as how it ties into the real reason a lot of these dads are working with me. Like you said earlier, they want to make sure that they're able to live long enough to be able to walk their daughter down the aisle. They're able to see the high school graduation. They're able to see the college graduation. They're able to be a grandfather around the grandkids and show the kid, like, just be actively engaged and know that they're not going to literally die before any of that happens.
Yeah, and it's one of the things. What one of the big wake up calls for me several years back was when I was reading an article, and it was talking about LeBron James and the way that he trains.
Mm,
And he said, he goes, people wouldn't even recognize the way that I train. He goes, I spend over $1 million a year on my body. I mean, he's making 50 million a year or whatever, so that's a
mm,
great investment. But he goes, my main concern is joints. And I was like, joints. And so he's like, I do a lot of most of my exercising is for joints. And I never thought of that. I was always like, oh, okay, well, I could just imagine him squatting and bench pressing. He needs to jump higher for basketball. I never thought of like elbows and knees and hips.
mhm.
You know what I mean? Like, but that was his. He's like, massage therapy is big to me. I have two massage therapists, a husband and wife, and I have them full time. I pay them
Yeah.
full time to be. And I was like, why? What?
Mhm.
And I think as guys, it's kind of one of those things where, I mean, he gets it because his income is dependent upon that. And he knows, he's getting older, and he knows, there's a limit to all of that. But to think of somebody that at that high caliber, whether you believe he's better than Jordan or not, that doesn't matter. But to look at somebody like that and say, I'm doing exercises in joints.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure, I don't want to speak for him or anything like that, but there's obviously a detailed rationale behind why he's doing that. And if you're really trying to pay attention, you're paying attention to and remaining cognizant and observant, I guess you could say, or even living vicariously through generations of athletes that came before you.
Right.
And that you're looking at other athletes that you looked up to. Geez Louise, like look at football players, man.
Yes. Yeah.
And how much of a wake-up call that is for younger generations of football players being like, yeah, I love this sport, but Jesus Christ, I want to I want to be able to live,
Yeah.
like a
I mean,
good
the PPE and all that stuff that's happening, it's amazing.
right. Like a great example, hey, if he's happy with it and he's about it, more power to him. But I feel like a great example for those that are that know bodybuilding is, and I don't know if you follow many, but I don't know if you've ever heard of him. His name's Ronnie Coleman.
Yes.
And
Yeah, he was on Joe Rogan here like last month, I think.
okay, gotcha. And sure, and that if he's still happy with what he did and that served him, like more power to him. But at least for me, through my lens of scope, it's lifting heavy, pushing yourself to the nth degree. It's going to,
Well, his
it's
whole
going,
back is fused. I mean, he doesn't
oh,
even look like that person anymore. When he was on the show, I mean, he talked about that, like how, he pushed himself to the point of breaking himself completely.
yeah, it's from my perspective, relative, and this is also relative to just my ethos of coaching and who I help and why I help them. It's just not a sustainable approach. So for LeBron to work within that kind of a framework, I love it. It's really exciting because you almost, it's an experiment in and of itself to where
Right.
we just have to wait and we have to see how that plays out. And my hope is that he's in a better position, health wise, for a lengthy, fruitful, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, where he's not in nearly as much pain, and that start to set the tone and set an example for how other athletes are to take care of themselves, as opposed to just you. Sure, you use your youth, you beat yourself up, it's a grind, and then you just come out the other end of the meat grinder and just kind of hope for the best for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and you see so many athletes that are dealing, I mean, like you talked about, especially with bodybuilding, when you see, all the complications and everything that went on, and the heart surgeries and then I mean, just taking it to extreme. And I think we as men, we feel like we have to do that. Like, like, okay, here I am, let's say there's a man that's out there, a dad that's out there and they're 30 pounds overweight and they want to start running 3 miles every day. You know what I'm saying? You just set yourself up for something that's going to be that's going to have failure, that's going to have injuries, and all you're going to do is be disappointed. Sitting there with a sore ankle or busted up knee. So like let's say that there's that dad that's sitting out there and they and they're listening to this, Pat, and they want to be involved. And I know you have different levels, like they can go online and be a part of your website, and then I know you do training and stuff like that, and I know all of that has different costs and stuff like that. We don't need to get into that, but if there's somebody out there and they're wanting to lose the 20-30 pounds, they're looking at their health as being long term, what's one of the things that they can start to do to have a conversation with you online?
Sure. I think it's pretty simple. I'll preface, and this is no different than what I tell my clients is I view myself as an educator and a facilitator more so than a quote unquote coach or a trainer. I love questions. So whether it's engaging in my content on Instagram, asking questions and comments, direct messaging, or I've got an application that can be filled out on my website. Any of those avenues, I highly, 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 highly encourage. I much rather would have to quote unquote deal with an individual asking me too many questions as opposed to one that won't ask any, because questions are always, in my opinion, rooted in searching for greater learning and knowledge and integrating that knowledge into one's life. So ask questions, even if it's relative to your own journey and how the heck do I do this, do that? Like there's no such thing as a stupid question. So engaging through those mediums of my website as well as my Instagram are, they're there for a reason and they're there to help educate.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people have a misconception of when they're looking at a trainer or a program, and I know I've talked to people and said, "Well, I need to get to this level first, or I'm going to do this, and I've watched these shows on TV, and I need to plan to be in pain for a month long." You know, can you kind of address those, like how somebody can start, as they are, and that with the level your holistic training, they're not going to be icing a knee every day for 3
Sure.
months straight, because I there's a lot of fear that comes with, taking a realization of your health.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really great question. This excites me. So, um, I'll put it this way, and this is knowing that I'm not the only one. I'm a part of a community and a network, and I would argue a movement of coaches and online coaches worldwide that identify with this ethos of practice. And I'll say this: if you're looking at working with a coach and they either tell you or you feel that you need to be at a certain point in order to work with them, I would encourage you to fire them. Um,
Good.
and it's centered around. I'm really big on doing the best I can in adopting and embodying a client centered approach. So, what a client centered approach is, I would argue it's kind of no different than what you and I are doing. We're sitting down, we're communicating. I'm getting to know you, you're getting to know me. I am putting myself in your shoes. I'm meeting you where you're at. I'm getting an understanding, at least initially for an hour, of what's going on in your life. And I should be very well equipped enough as a professional in the industry for almost a decade now. I damn well better be equipped enough to meet you where you're at and help you navigate what's familiar to you right now, instead of the opposite, which is, it's still a very prevalent problem within the industry. And like I said, I've evolved through this phase of my coaching whenever I was first in the industry, which is a coach centered approach. And I feel like that's what perpetuates that thinking of the client thinking that that's what they need. They think they need a strict meal program. They think they need a crazy intense exercise program. They think they need to be in good enough shape to work with a coach. That's a client centered approach. And for the vast majority of people, that doesn't work. So, being able to work with a professional that vibes with you, that you feel is going to understand your unique needs rather than put you through the ringer or force you to get prepared to work with them, I truly don't believe it has that client's interests, long term interests at heart.
Yeah, and because there's that I don't deserve a trainer. I mean, earlier you talked about that. I don't deserve this, I don't deserve that, and I want people to understand, if they're looking at getting a good trainer, where you're at right now, if you can walk up, 10 stairs and that puts you out of breath and you feel exhausted, that's a level where you can begin at. It's not where you, because there's a lot of people that think that they have to get to another level, or, I'd be too embarrassed to talk to a trainer. A trainer are for people that, are athletes and stuff like that. So that's kind of one of the things that I wanted you to address, is to kind of, that you're very accepting for wherever that person may be at.
Yeah, because I feel like if it's not that way and it's more so of a coach centered approach where the client feels like they have to get prepared somehow to work with the client, or be prepared to work with the coach, I'm only perpetuating the issues at hand that many dads face of just continuing to kick the can down the road and wait.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's just, and a lot of times those things can be excuses to not take action. When if you can eliminate those excuses in a safe environment, if you can have that communication, with you or a great trainer, and make these decisions, maybe it needs to be more food centric more than working out, and working on diet first, and I know, and I've talked to you enough, and I've seen your posts, and watch your Instagram stories and stuff, where I know how your philosophy is, but it's, there's so many different levels that can be custom made to you in the environment that you need to be in to be realistic when it comes to the holistic side of health, not just, do I have a six pack or not?
Right. Right. Which I think ties into the beginning of the call, which is the exact reason I made the decision to do a photo shoot at Blake's Lottaburger instead of around of a bunch of healthy food. Because let's be honest, you're going to want to go eat good food, and you're going to want to know that you can lose weight and you can do it without having to sacrifice foods that are rather important to you.
Yeah, and I love that, and we'll close on that because we've been, an hour and 20 minutes. But I want people to understand, that health, when it looks for health, and especially with things that are going on, when you have so much uncertainty that's going on in life, there's a certainty that you can have, and the ability to be able to oxygenate your body. I mean, there's so many good things that happens whenever you begin to have good health. The decisions that you can make, if you're an entrepreneur or business leader that listens to this podcast, that ability to be able to lead properly, to have that respect for yourself, the ability, how it translates into your relationships whenever your body's working properly. And like you had mentioned earlier, in bed, whatever that is, especially as a man, it just translates and filters throughout every part of your life. I just can't, I want people to understand, at 47, it just becomes more and more important to me. The older I get, the more that I can break that paradigm of my dad at 47 looked like he was 65, and we have this ability with the advances in medicine, everything on, to live to 100, 120 years old. I mean, you're just turned 30, that you're guaranteed, unless something happens, God forbid, but
Sure.
120 is there, you know what I'm saying? That's what they're saying. So we have this ability to be able to see our great grandkids. And
God, yeah, imagine that. Holy
and
crap.
so that's why I wanted to bring you on again. One, I know it looks bleak. I know there's all kinds of inconsistencies going on in the world, but in your sphere of influence, as a leader, you can have control to the extent of being the best version that you can be. And I want you to close it out, Pat, if you would. If you give your website again and Instagram so people can get a hold of you. And I encourage people to do that. If you've been thinking and you've been putting it off, now is the time, more than ever, I think, to get healthy, to think healthy, to be long-term. So how would somebody get a hold of you again? What's your website, your Instagram?
Yeah, absolutely. Instagram is aware. That's AWARE _life, LIFEABQ. And then my website is www.aware.training.
Awesome, Pat. And thank you again for posting the Blake Lottaburger.
Yeah, no
I
problem.
love that. And I want people to go to that. I hope that intrigues them. If you're not from Albuquerque, because we've been getting a ton of downloads from California and other areas.
Cool.
Blake Lottaburger is a local burger joint that's really good. It's got green chili on it. And one of the things that you had said in the post was, yeah, you can have that occasionally, from what I got. And maybe you can interpret this a little bit, but you can have that occasionally, but you don't need the double meat stack. You can get a smaller one and enjoy that and eat that and spend time with your kids or whatever that is occasionally.
Exactly. Yep. No, you hit the nail on the head.
Well, perfect. Well, thanks, Pat. I appreciate it. If you'd stay on here, we're going to, it'll record the audio or whatever, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect. That works, man.
Thank you for joining us on the Albuquerque Business Podcast. And thanks to our sponsor, RigbyDigital.com. Make sure to subscribe and share. And go to abqpodcast.com. Get show notes, resources, and links to everything we talked about today to help you navigate your journey as an entrepreneur and business owner.